What's going on, traders? We got a lot to talk about. This is going to be a banger video. You're not going to want to miss this, so let's get straight into it. So, in our last video, we were talking about how these rising wedge patterns are forming across the board, whether it's the NQ, the ES, SPY, triple Q, so on and so forth. We were also talking about how these bearish engulfing patterns are forming as well. And one thing I mentioned in the last video is that even though let's actually zoom in here. Even though we have bearish engulfing candles forming, it doesn't necessarily mean they have to play out right away. And I think a perfect example or multiple examples is right here, right? You had this huge, let's actually zoom in a little bit more. You had this huge engulfing pattern, right? And then the next day you had somewhat of a doji, and then you start to see that breakdown happen. Another example will be right here as well. You had a bit bullish candle, and then you had a bearish engulfing candle break below this daily supply and demand zone, and then the next few days, you ended up being somewhat bullish. You started to retest the daily supply and demand zone, and then you gap down and you started to break further down in the market. So the question is, are we looking at that same scenario happening right now, where we could be pretty much bullish for the next day or two? Or maybe not bullish at all. Maybe we just drop tomorrow. We'll get into that possibility in a bit. But maybe we see some type of move here. Let's actually map it out where we bounce from this area right here. We see one more retest towards that 498 500 area. We form some type of double top here, and then we break this neckline all the way down at around, I want to say 485, and start really heading towards the downside. There's fair value gaps towards the downside here that need to be mitigated, so it will make perfect sense if we do break down that we start heading towards those fair value gaps. So that is a scenario that we could be looking at in regards to the next few days, right? Or another move is, and I mean, it's a no-brainer, either the market goes up or down, right? Where we just completely break down. And we're going to talk about what can cause this type of breakdown, right? But one thing I want you guys to note is that when we go back to the NQ, right? We still have this area where there's a lot of turbulence right here, just a lot of turbulence. So, in order for us to really break down here, we need some type of news, right? And what news do we have tomorrow? We have TSM earnings in the morning, and then we have Netflix earnings towards close or at close, right? And so, right here is where we're really going to need to break through, whether it's to the upside or to the downside. And if we break through these guys and stop them out of their position, the drop is going to be pretty drastic. I mean, it's going to be elite, in my opinion. We're very illiquid below these guys, okay? Very illiquid. So, the next, once we get below this area, if we drop below this area, the next few weeks or so are going to be pretty bad for bulls, in my opinion. But we're not quite there yet. We'll have to see what happens between tomorrow and Friday. But it's just something I want you guys to keep in mind. And so, if we are looking at a bounce from right here, because we're pretty much here, right? Let's actually map it out real quick. We're pretty much here where we could just bounce right here, right? We could just bounce right here and pretty much leave these guys in the dust. And again, I think it's obvious that we'll need news for this type of move to happen. And then maybe we see one more retest towards 20,500, 20,600 before we start seeing that breakdown. Now, another possibility is that we just continue to go higher towards that 20,800 target, which I've mentioned is a target for more upside. We could be looking at 20,800 or 21,300, possibly being the highest. And my all-time high targets for this year in regards to the triple Qs is still 510. So still on the table. It's just right now things are looking pretty shaky. Okay, I just wouldn't trust the market right now. Overall, still pretty bullish. I will say that much. And I'm going to get into the reason why I'm still pretty much bullish for now, at least until the market, pretty much proves me wrong here. And so we look at the SPY. And so the SPY is showing the same thing where we have this rising wedge pattern once again, and then we have this bearish engulfing pattern. But then look what happened today, or I guess the next day, right? Today we ended up going back to the upside, and I mentioned this in the last video that not every time, but usually when you have a bearish engulfing candle, it doesn't necessarily mean it has to play out right away. So this will be a perfect example of that. You have another example here. You have this huge bearish engulfing candle, and then the next few days you were pretty much bullish. So we could pretty much either break completely down tomorrow, which is very much possible given the news we have tomorrow, or we could just do one of these moves where we just pretty much be annoying, consolidate, and just hug this trend line until whatever happens, happens, right? So that is the move that we could be looking at. And so this is where things get very interesting. And so in my last video, I was talking about Bitcoin. It might have been in the last two videos or something like that. And so I pretty much mentioned that I can't see Bitcoin pretty much reaching all-time highs, I should say, or new highs. And like almost immediately after that video, Bitcoin just started to break completely out. Okay, it just broke out to the upside. It broke above 67,000. So the question is, can Bitcoin go higher from here? As long as it stay above this supply and demand zone, I think Bitcoin's fine. It has the potential to head towards 70K. And so we'll just have to wait and see. And so this is when I was pretty much, or Bitcoin was pretty much confirming that those bearish engulfing candles that we were seeing on the NQ and the triple Qs and the SPY, so on and so forth, were pretty much not going to play out today. Because we're talking about Bitcoin here, and if we're talking about Bitcoin being a possible leading indicator, we have to assume that Bitcoin is pretty much going to give you an idea on where the market is going to go the next day. And so, with this breakout happening, it was only safe to assume that there is a possibility that the market is going to be bullish today. And it was more so bullish than bearish, I will say that much, but it was mostly consolidation today. We probably will see more upside tomorrow. We'll get into that in a bit. And so it was very interesting. So this is where things get really, really interesting. We look at the VIX, and then we're going to get into like TSM earnings and all that fun stuff, right? We look at the VIX, and we go to the 4 hour time frame, right? And so we have this broadening wedge pattern here. And so far, I mean, I don't make this stuff up, guys. You can say you can't plot the VIX, whatever the case may be. I have no issues plotting the VIX. It's never done me wrong, so I don't know. But regardless, you bounced here in this area here, you bounced here, or you attempted to bounce, and then bear step back in, or whoever, volatility step back in, and then you broke below this broadening wedge. This is a very good sign for the bulls. Okay, very good sign. So I will say that the VIX is showing that the market has the potential to start seeing more upside. And the projected move for this, believe it or not, is 18. Right now, the VIX is at 19.57. So if we start heading towards 18 on the VIX, that is a very, very good sign for the overall market. Now, this is where things are kind of throwing me for a loop right now. We look at the semiconductor ETFs. So we look at the semiconductor ETFs, and they look bearish. Okay, they absolutely look bearish. I will say that much. We go to the daily time frame here, and nothing about this looks bullish in my opinion. There's a possibility. I mean, there's a possibility for this type of move. We do have TSM earnings. We'll go over that in a bit. But right now, I just don't see any signs of real upside. What's really bugging me is just how we broke back into this ascending triangle. That is not something you want to see. All right. Anytime you break out of ascending triangle, you typically want to see more upside. But we hit this trend right here, and then we just reject it. I mean, we got close to it. We didn't exactly hit it, but we got pretty close. And so you guys know I'm not making it up. We zoom out, we bounced here, and then we did our little roller coaster here. We rejected here, and now we went back to the trend, and then we rejected, and we had a huge rejection thanks to that ASML news that happened yesterday. So right now, I will say semiconductor ETFs are not looking too strong. All right. So if something was going to drop the market tomorrow, I imagine it's going to be this. And so we're looking, and this is what we're looking at right now. So I don't know, guys. You guys see it here. We bounced here. We bounced here. I didn't force anything, and we broke below it with a bearish engulfing candle. So pretty scary, I will say that much. The potential target we could be looking at is about 235. All right. This is the daily time frame. It doesn't have to play out like right away. It doesn't have to happen tomorrow or anything like that. I mean, it is TSM earnings. Maybe it has the potential to cause that move to happen that fast. Who knows? But right now, I don't think that move is going to happen all at once. But I would be very cautious and really just wait to see how things play out in regards to these semiconductor ETFs. We look at SOXX as well. And so SOXX is pretty much showing the same thing. I mean, it's really no different. We broke out of this ascending triangle here, which is a bullish pattern, right? We hit resistance. We broke back below the supply and demand zone, and look what's happening. We are doing the same exact thing as we saw on SMH, okay? And so we pretty much more or less retested the supply and demand zone. We didn't quite like really retested. We're kind of like in the middle of Narnia right here. But regardless, even if we do see some type of upside, it just seems like it's going to be short lived, in my opinion. Maybe we see one of these moves. Maybe we hit about 235 one more time on SOXX. Maybe that will help SMH as well. I mean, I believe SMH is the leading, one of the leaders. But regardless, you still could be looking at more downside happening in the near future, probably next week or something like that, if these semiconductor ETFs remain in this area right here. Now, obviously, I mean, I guess we can do something like this. It's really tough to say. Point being here is that we're below a lot of resistance, not resistance, a lot of support right now. Okay, a lot. What used to be resistance is now support. Okay, so it's really tough for me to see us break above this area. So we'll have to see. So this is what's throwing me for a loop. And so we look at TSM. And so TSM, believe it or not, looks bearish. And I don't think this if TSM, I'm not saying TSM is going to miss earnings or anything like that. I can't really call that. What I will say, I mean, even after hours, it jumped like $2, but I just I mean look where it is. Okay, just look where it is, guys. We see this daily supply and demand zone. This is actually a little bit overextended, but you see this daily supply and demand zone, and I mean you have this huge bearish engulfing candle here, right, on TSM. And I mean, there's a lot of gaps to the downside. I will say that much. There's a lot of gaps to the downside. And so we get a better look on the 4 hour, and the 4 hour just looks pretty diabolical as well. You broke below the supply and demand zone, and look what's happening. You're pretty much just consolidating under it, right? So there, I don't know. It just looks like TSM is just not looking too good, in my opinion. So when we're combining SMH, when we're combining SOXX, and then we're combining what we're looking at on TSM, it's just not looking too well. And so this leads me to my point here is that the VIX looks like it wants to drop more, right? The Qs and the Nasdaq and the SPY, ES whatsoever, they still are in bullish territory. I will say that much. And so, how do we pretty much put all this stuff together? What I will say is that if we do get a drop tomorrow, if TSM just so happens to tank the market for whatever reason, not whatever reason, obviously it will be for earnings, right? But let's say TSM does tank the market, right? It could be short lived. It could be a quick just dump and pump. Okay, it could be a quick dump, and then the market starts to recover almost immediately at open. Okay, so that's what we could be looking at if we're going by the VIX. Okay, let's go back to the VIX here. Actually, let's focus on TSM real quick and just get an idea on where TSM can go. And so, if TSM does drop for earnings, it has the potential to head towards 180. Okay, that's really not much from here. But my issue here with TSM is just how pretty illiquid it is in this area. So, TSM does break down. It's going to drop pretty fast. So 180 will be my first target, and then after that, I'm looking at a move towards about 172, between 172 and 175. But there's bulls all in this area. There's bullish wicks all in this area right here. That probably doesn't even mean much for earnings. It's just something to pay attention to. And so, again, my overall point here is that semiconductors don't look good, but the VIX looks good. Okay, if you're bullish, okay. So that's my overall point here. And so, if we are going to get a drop tomorrow for whatever reason, whether it's the actual news that comes in, retail news that comes in, or the earnings news that comes in. If we do get a drop, it looks like it could be short lived if we're just going by what the VIX is showing us and just going by where the SPY and the triple Qs are on these time frames, right? And so we go back to the triple Qs and we see where we are, we have a doji. We're still above a 485. Now, we can easily, if TSM does have bad earnings and it has an effect on the overall market or at least the tech side of the market, we can just do one of these moves real quick, retest 485. Maybe we see 485 pre market or something like that, where we just drop like tremendous and then everybody is panicking and then we immediately start to recover. I think that's a possibility. I think that's more possible than anything else. Now, TSM can absolutely be earnings, sure, but if we are going to get a drop, this is the move that I would be looking at. I don't think the drop of all drops is going to be caused by TSM earnings. if there was to be a major drop, I would think Netflix will have a bigger hold on things than TSM earnings. So we'll see. I think and the reason why I think that is because market makers are already expecting TSM, or at least I would say retails and possibly market makers are already having expectations that TSM might fail just based off ASML. And so it wouldn't be surprising if TSM doesn't miss earnings or doesn't surprise for earnings because we already got a glimpse of what ASML earnings was. And so I think market makers, Wall Street, retails, they're all pretty much in the same boat where they're just like, yeah, we're not expecting a beat here. And the market is very forward looking, and so we probably priced all that in already. It's very much possible. So we'll have to see, right? But point being here is that TSM doesn't look good, SMH doesn't look good, SOSX doesn't look good. The VIX looks good for the bulls. If we're going by the triple Qs, we're still looking good. Worst case scenario, we hit about 485, and then we possibly start to recover from there. NQ still above 20,300. That's still bullish. ES still above, I believe, what was it? What did I say? 5870, still bullish. I mean, they're dropping after hours, so we'll have to see. But regardless, things are still looking good. And if we do get a drop, it could be very short lived. So I know I kind of like rushed through this video. I really have to go. So I am sorry that I had to pretty much rush through this video. So hopefully it all makes sense. Be careful trading tomorrow. These semiconductors, I mean, let's look at NVIDIA real quick because I know there's some traders who actually are in NVIDIA right now in our Discord as well. So in regards to Nvidia, and this is what I'm talking about right here. Look what Nvidia is doing. And so I talked about this in the last video. I said Nvidia has the potential to retest if we do end up being bullish today. Nvidia has the potential to head back towards that 138, 140 target here. And there's still space. There's still room for that possibility. We still can see a move towards that 140, 141, 138, somewhere around there, and then start to break down. There's very much possible. I still have a price target of 145, 150 on Nvidia. It's just upside seems very limited right now. Unless TSM earnings just carries everything to the moon or to Jupiter, I don't know. But right now, upside just looks very limited in regards to the semiconductors. I will say that much, especially when we saw that huge breakdown based off ASML earnings. And so it's really tough to say where how if Nvidia can see 150 this week. Okay, so right now I'm going to lowball it and focus on 138 and 140 on Nvidia. We can look at the daily time frame here. There's still a bit more space to the upside, but as you guys can see, I mean, like I said in the last video, you have this bearish engulfing candle, and look what happens the next day. And so, unless we break back above this trend right here, we can start heading towards 145. But right now, it looks like there is a possibility for a rejection back to the downside. Maybe we see a move towards it's the lowest we can be looking at is about 119. I don't think that's going to happen in one day, but just be careful, okay? Other than that, that's all I have for this video. Discord link is in the description below if you want to get an idea on how we're going to trade a potential drop in the market or how we're going to trade the upside in the market. We'll see. Other than that, that's all I have for this video. Hopefully, you guys got something out of it. If you didn't, let me know what I can do better in the comments below. If you disagree, let me know. Let me know if I missed something. If you agree, let me know as well. Other than that, until the next video, traders, have a good one.